Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Dr. Graham Taylor. My guest today is Dr. Paul Zeitz. Paul is a preventive medicine physician, epidemiologist, and advocate for global justice and human rights with over 35 years of experience. He is the initiator of the Unify movements, including the peaceful revolutionary political movement Unify USA, launched in 2023 to create a United States 2.0 through constitutional renewal. He has a forthcoming book, Revolutionary Optimism, 7 Steps for Living as a Love-Centered Activist, and his podcast inspires personal and global transformation. Paul's debut memoir, Waging Justice, links individual healing to societal repair. He has extensive experience in climate transformation, equity, democracy, sustainable development, child welfare, and global health. He co-founded the BRAVE movement, Keeping Kids Safe, Global Action for Children, and the Global AIDS Alliance. He has served in various capacities at PEPFAR, USAID, and the CDC. Ordained as a Shir Hashirim rabbi in 2023, Paul is also certified by the American Board of Preventive Medicine. We're excited to have Paul with us today to discuss love-centered activism. Paul, welcome to our show.
Hey, thanks, Graham. It's so great to be here with you and your listeners.
Thank you. It is nice to have you. You know, I know your book, Waging Justice, links individual healing with societal repair. And I wonder if we just kind of, as we start out today, if you could share with us your own personal journey that brought you into the field of activism.
Yeah, so you're referring to my memoir, Waging Justice, which I published in 2018. Yeah, I actually had to figure it out myself. So I had to write a memoir to study my journey and figure out like what happened to me. It was like a whirlwind of a few decades. So I'm a physician by training, and I'm trained in public health and preventive medicine. And I was drawn to work in sub-Saharan Africa. And I worked on child survival, ensuring all children have a right to health and survival. And while I was living in Zambia in Southern Africa in the late 90s, I was there during the heyday of the AIDS pandemic. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was like a technocrat. I was like a public health expert working inside of the US government and the government of Zambia, providing expert ideas. And I realized one day I was driving down this road and I came upon an intersection. I had driven past this many, many times, but one day I actually saw what was right in front of me. There was a white minivan parked on the side of the road, and they were selling coffins. And I just pulled over, broke down, and I had I think it was like a wake-up call or an awakening of like, I cannot just accept being in the systems and going along with the status quo. I said I had to do everything I could to stop the dying from the global AIDS pandemic. I made that commitment in that moment. I didn't know what that meant at that time, but that's actually part of what a revolutionary optimistic view is like taking a stand for what you believe in, and then your life unfolds as it will.
What a moment. That must have been very sobering and probably a lot to take in. Sometimes when we see things for the very first time, even though we've seen them 100 times before, there's almost a readiness within ourselves, isn't there, to take something in that moment.
Yeah, it was a Christian aid youth project. I think I forgot to mention that. So it was like a shocking paradox, that a religious project, that's what they had to focus on. Things were so dire. And I just thought about how dissonant that was from the vision of love thy neighbor and peaceful coexistence that Jesus taught, and we learned from our faith traditions and spirituality. So it really was like a moment where like the tapes from my childhood, I was raised as a Jew, and we were told never again, never again.
Yes.
And I said, oh my God, this is the Holocaust of my time, or this is a Holocaust I'm witnessing. I need to do something different and act.
Wow. Well, we're talking about love-centered activism, and I would imagine in that moment of kind of pulling over and kind of soberingly looking at this, that must have been. I think love changes us, when we drop into that place, and it's interesting. When coming into the show today, just for fun and kind of a 11th hour moment, I did a search for why is love the only way to heal? And what came up was kind of cool. It says love is the key ingredient to healing. When we feel love, we are connecting with the true self, capital T, capital S. When we feel love, we are connecting with the true self, and the true self is perfect without flaw. Consequently, the more we can see and appreciate the perfection of spirit in our lives and in those of everyone around us, the more we feel healed and deeply loved. You're talking about this whole love-centered approach, and I'm curious, how do you define love in the context of activism, and why are you seeing this and advocating for this being such a powerful source for change?
So, the journey of living into revolutionary optimism or as a revolutionary optimist is really fundamentally living the path of love and choosing as the way that you make choices in your life.
Yeah,
So, it's about like asking yourself the question, what would it look like if I put love at the center of my every step, my every action, and my every breath, and every word that I utter?
yeah,
And that's a process of exploration that is ongoing. And the part of this that the book tries to do is to work that through for yourself so that you can live into your full potential, your full power, your full self awakening, and your self liberation. And then channel that energy, that love force that is flowing from you into the work that we need to do for our collective healing and repair. And that is like, it's like an interrelationship of those two: self
yeah,
liberation and collective liberation. They feed off each other.
yeah. That's a beautiful description. You're talking about as you say this revolutionary optimism is putting love in front of everything we do. What if we all did that? And that sounds like it's a process of reconditioning oneself to be conscious and aware of trying to put that first and have that go in front. I know you encourage an inside out approach to healing where one can work towards their own self liberation and transformation, like you're talking about, such that we can ignite, as you described, this profound depth of optimism within, oneself first. And then they can have a tremendous power to help in the process of change. When you've worked with folks with this inside out approach and developing from within the things you're talking about, what are some of the core areas that you see typically one having to struggle with to get love out in front, to have this optimistic, uh, love centered approach that allows things to be changed from that perspective, putting love out in front of everything? What are people having to work through, do you find?
Yeah, so this is part of step 2, which is focused on self-liberation. And the the key part of this is that our minds are operating in a common way. We have parts of our brain that are designed to protect us
Sure,
from danger.
sure.
And it's our old reptilian brain. And I call it in the book our inner dragon. And I offer practices and approaches for understanding who this character is that operates in our mind, and first identifying it, and then having a peace summit with it and creating a peaceful, loving relationship with it. And through that process, not being controlled by it and learning how to access the right side of the brain, actually, which is your higher self, the part of you that is love centered, that sees the interconnection, sees the interconnectivity between all of us, and that sees the beauty and the art of life itself. And so that we have access to that.
Yeah.
And we just have to learn how to differentiate those parts. And then it becomes a choice to live from one place or the other.
I like the idea of being able to recognize that process of change, which then frees us up to be willfully able to make that shift into that empathic, love-centered place. Again, you emphasize that empathy and compassion for others, even those, with whom we may disagree or have conflicting interests. But if we can put love out in front of it, there's an opportunity for change to occur. What does it take, and what do you offer? Maybe dabbling into your book a little bit here, but what does it take in terms of personal reflection, one's own self introspection, with an emphasis on personal growth first, and then enter that into that empathically driven, love-based interaction with others that you're proposing. What's that take?
So step 4 of the book is called peace crafting. And I offer this as a opportunity. It's a art too, right? You're
Yes.
crafting who you are in your interactions with other people.
Yeah.
And it's a 4-part cycle and it spins. Like I have it as a virtual implant in my mind. So I'm always like living through it and trying to figure out, first of all, being a listening friend and
Mm.
really learning how to listen and waiting sometimes and asking the question, why am I talking? WAIT. Why am I talking? Sometimes it might be I should slow down and or
Mm.
I should talk less or I should give space for other people. Or maybe not saying anything at times could be the most powerful way of my being, my loving presence, if I'm trying to bring a loving presence into the conversation. And this applies in our family. I have this going on with my wife, but it also applies to like Zoom calls and work calls or meetings and
Yes.
conferences and collective or organizational dynamics that we might be in, business partners, whatever. So peace crafting can apply to all that as well. The second part is embracing multiple perspectives.
Mm.
So in our polarized world right now, a lot of people are finding that other people are in this kind of state of it's my way or the highway. Like
Yes.
I have a my view, it's fixed and static, and like I'm right and you're wrong. So it creates a polarization. So I've been practicing really diving into places where I might not have gone before in terms of
Yes.
really understanding other people's perspectives, really listening. And I believe actually that there's about 8 billion people on the planet. I think there's about 8 billion perspectives. In fact, I have multiple
Absolutely.
perspectives at any one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lastly, I'll say like people frequently tell me what my perspective is. They've predetermined what my perspective is. So I'm like, how do you know? Because
Yeah.
my perspective is always evolving.
Yeah.
So I just think it's like learning how to play with multiple perspectives. Next is a big one called love speech. It's like, okay, so I'm with all these other people. Sometimes I get triggered and sometimes I don't agree. So how do I have my stand, have my beliefs, have my truth, but also train myself to only use love speech in
Mm.
response
Mm.
and use uplifting speech, no shaming, and create a safe space for all of us to learn and connect. Last part quickly is around building trust. So for me, I used to be in a place where trust was like an on and off switch. And my friends and I created this thing called a trustometer, which means that I can love everyone unconditionally, but I don't trust everyone. So
Mhm.
I can say, you're way down on the trustometer. Basically, this allows for me to look at all my relationships, both personally and professionally, and say, if I don't trust you now, how can I build trust? Or it lets me say sometimes I need to draw a line. Anyway,
Sure.
again, it makes it dynamic. The trust is not static, it's dynamic, and it can be rebuilt with some practices.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com and use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
These are some cool things. I want to go back to the polarization piece for a moment. In the process of change or even activism, as you're describing here, trying to bring about good change, how have you understood polarization happening?
Well,
Why?
I think it's really a manifestation of that inner dragon that we talked about earlier. It gets activated. Our we have things that we've learned from our family, from our childhood. Then we have cues to activate that inner dragon from our social media and from our society and from, what's going on around us. So
Mm.
all those things activate that lizard, that inner dragon within.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to protect yourself, you pull back and you like connect, you siloize with
Yeah.
people who agree with you. And, you can end up dehumanizing the other and
Absolutely.
losing that perspective that we're actually all humans and we're all
Yes.
interconnected. And
Yeah,
that is a
exactly.
big crisis right now, I would say, in
Yeah.
our country and in many parts of the world.
There's such a divide around that. I love what you're saying. Basically, we're all interconnected. If we look at ourselves as brothers and sisters of one another, we are fighting ourselves in wrong ways, and that polarization is usually driven by wrong things, and it inhibits, like you're describing, an opportunity just to feel comfortable enough within oneself and confident enough within oneself to say, "Well, I'm fairly clear with what I've got so far. Maybe that understanding might expand over time, and ideally it does with new information and new experiences. But tell me what's going on for you." And how that's not become safe anymore, how people cannot sit down and say, "Hey, I'd love to hear what is important to you and to give you the floor right now," like you said, and just help me grow with maybe some new understanding. If we disagree, we disagree, but at least we have a shared understanding that we can grow from. And the cancel culture, the people don't realize how winning versus understanding, winning or seeking to win one's opinion really inhibits your growth, inhibits necessary change, inhibits really us becoming our best selves. And we don't do ourselves any favors by winning just because we can shout out somebody or we become the author of their story, like you're saying. We name or label people. We're authoring their experience. There's a real sadness in that, isn't there?
Yeah, I think it's painful. And I think what I hope can happen with revolutionary optimism is that people can come together in family groups or friend groups or neighbor groups or book club groups
Yeah.
and explore the practices together because
Yeah.
I believe it will deepen friendships and deepen relationships. People will learn and grow together. And that is something that is kind of missing in our society or it's waning. And I think there's an opportunity to bring that back. And also, I believe that most of us are actually love centered activists. We may not identify as that, but love centered activism, every love centered action counts. And that includes self care, self love, all
Yeah.
the love that we offer our children, our family, our anyone that we're taking care of or that we've helped support during our life. And also anything else that we're doing with our work in the world and or other forms of service. So I frequently find people, oh, what I'm doing doesn't matter. It's not good enough. That's the inner dragon talking me
Sure.
down. And it's like saying, no, actually, I am a look at all the love I'm offering right now, right today. We're already there. And now it's like, how do we expand, as you said earlier, capacities and our continuity of love in
Yes.
everything we think and do?
I think you're so right. I think people want to be able to interact in these ways. I think they want to cultivate these kinds of connections, love based. I think that's the desire that we have. And to be honest, I think there's a small handful of puppeteers that are wanting to disrupt that in the world right now, even in our nation. And I think people want to come back to the ability to connect and to talk and to work things through. I've been living in Hawaii now for the last 40 years, and we have a practice here called Ho'oponopono. And it's a traditional Hawaiian practice of reconciliation and forgiveness. It's beautiful.
Mm.
And I first thought when I went for the training in it a number of years ago that it would be like a big circle and kind of a kumbaya moment where everybody kind of talks and hashes things out. It's not. It's regarded as kind of a miracle healing element where the one practicing it becomes responsible for their own emotions, feelings, and their own life experiences, where the concept of the exterior world affecting one's life and decisions is a concept that's actually alien to the prayer and healing technique that takes place. And in the Ho'oponopono process, you acknowledge any disharmony or conflict that you've contributed to, or knowingly or unknowingly brought to the moment, and express this desire to fix it. And it sounds very similar to what you're describing. It's that heart that you bring through it. The act of verbalizing maybe regret or forgiveness or gratitude or love being those powerful steps towards healing and mending broken relationships or systems, whatever it may be. It sounds quite similar in the spirit of what you're bringing to this love centered activism.
That's a beautiful example of practice. It sounds completely beautiful, and I
Yeah.
want to do it. And I think there's many different ways that people access those kinds of spaces through being in nature, for example, or being in spiritual community or being with a
Yes.
religious community. People find their way to that sense of interconnectedness. We're all one, an experience of that. They feel that. And in many different ways. So it sounds like it's not a new thing, right? This has been a way that humans have survived over the centuries,
Yes.
probably, by having
I
these
think you're right.
practices to help us
Yeah,
cope
I
with
think you're
our
right.
human experience.
And I think, the Hawaiian tradition has some really lovely practices that have been in place, like you said, for a number of years. What I love about what you're doing is you're giving folks a reminder that we can still do this and we need to do this in this time in our lives. We need to take these steps or we will self destruct from within. I would love to come back right now to you sharing with us a little bit more about your book. What would you like us to know to kind of whet our appetite here and to help us appreciate more about what you've written and what you want us to understand?
So we've talked a lot about the first half of the book,
Yeah.
is really that inner journey and that inner work and that how we relate to each other. Then the I think the best part of the book, the most fun, is the second half, which is like how do we unlock our political imagination or our imagination. So step 5 is imagineering, and
Mm.
it's about unlocking radical imagination and radical visions. And actually what I'm finding is that a lot of people already have them. It's not something that
It's
people,
there.
but they hide
Yes.
them and they don't
Yes.
feel safe sharing them.
No.
And there's something about Imagineering, which is to open up the space to invite all that. And then Imagineering is not just the vision and imagination, it's how do you translate that into reality. And I talk a lot about love centered movement building, 10 best practices. And I also help people figure out what role they want to play in different aspects of what's possible. And there's many different roles. Not everyone has to do the same thing, right? Everyone has to figure out their own role. The big message here is also that we're in this together. It's not about being a solo pilot and going out and fixing whatever you're trying to address. It's
Yes.
bringing people together. And
Yeah.
then we get into sparking peaceful revolutions, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, and
Yes.
we're undertaking what's called peaceful resistance or nonviolent direct action is another way people call it. And that can happen from your home, from your office, from the people that are mobilizing on the streets. It's a collective effort. And I really get into the nuts and bolts of the different roles and the different reasons. I think it's also maybe helpful for people to make sense of what's happening now. Like they're seeing all these
Yeah.
Palestinian liberation encampments, or they're seeing the climate protesters really ramp up their confrontational advocacy. So 99% of these folks are love centered activists, and this is how they're sharing their love for the most part. I think that's what's going on. And then lastly, the book wraps up with a unifying step, which is about unifying within, like
Yeah.
as you clarify over time your life's purpose, and
Yes.
then you figure out how you actually create your life to be aligned with that purpose. I know I lived for decades where I felt a dissonance. I felt
Yeah.
disconnected. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to manifest what I felt inside in what I was doing in the world. And then it's our collective unifying and to break down the silos between us and think about interpartisan, interspiritual, interracial, intergender, and looking at everything that we do from a unifying lens. How do we bring that forward in what we're up to in our lives? That's the
Really nice.
book, and I really am excited to share this and connect with people who want support. And I'm
Yeah.
offering any support I can provide to love centered activists in whatever they're up to.
That's so good, man. Congratulations. What a great life's purpose here being lived out and putting love in your days in front of everything that you're doing. I want to talk about one piece right here. Steps that can be taken. We've talked about how right now it's not safe, very safe to speak up or to have different opinions sometimes that don't align, with maybe what the public piece is. People are afraid that their business is going to get shut down, their person is going to be attacked, whatever else it may be. But I think we're getting to a place, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, where we need to start taking some steps. And you talked about creating safety. And it's almost like I need to create safety before I step into something, or I need to know that it's going to be safe. And I think we're at a place where we need to be kind of bold. I think we might even need to embrace the Nike slogan, just do it, where we courageously, lovingly, putting love in front of it, but we take this step in voicing our imaginations, our creativity, and putting them out there, because I think people need and want to hear them. And when you do hear somebody speak up, you find people easily gravitating towards those things and embracing it or kind of raising their hands, but they may not do it on their own all the time. And I think there's almost kind of this moral nudge that you're giving people to say, hey, try. Maybe do it in your conversations around the dinner table, or with your neighbor, or with your in your community, and kind of branch out. Am I
Mm.
hearing that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's about bringing peace crafting into the public arena
Yeah.
and into places where people who care about our future,
Yeah.
our collective future, can, have an opportunity to Imagineer together. I actually
Yeah.
do that in meetings now. I have a segment of meetings, dedicated to Imagineering, and people love that part because
Well,
everyone has a million
well, as you're
ideas.
describing this, I'm thinking of you as Walt Disney. He was the ultimate Imagineering person, wasn't he? I mean, he imagined these things.
He did coin the term, and
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And I love what you're doing, because I think, what if we take that and do what you're doing with it? What if we imagined and then created a society, relationships, et cetera, that get to be love centered the way you're describing? Continue. I love this.
Yeah. So for where I got to on this was to ask the question, what would it look like if we put love at the center
Yeah.
of our social, economic, and political systems?
Yeah.
So that's the inquiry that I'm on now. That's the exploration that I'm on now.
Yeah.
And what I have learned is that our system of government that the United States has right now, for example, and many other governments have, is a system based on a caste. It's a
Yes.
system of one group of people asserting control over another group. It sounds like a lot of inner dragons trying to control all the other people.
That's right.
And so I actually believe that we're due for constitutional renewal and transformation to recreate our society with a love-centered approach, with human dignity at the center, at a healthy relationship between humans and our earth that we're all living on. And don't do it, that's why I'm advocating for peaceful revolutions,
Yeah.
because I believe the devastation and the violence has already got high velocity, and so I'm offering this idea of peaceful revolutions, love-centered peaceful revolutions,
Yes.
as a response to redirect the trajectory of where we're going with humanity.
Yes.
And I want to touch on what you were asking about because it's really interesting. We talk about like being afraid to speak up, or we need people to be able to speak up. And I
Yeah.
do have a whole section in the book about limiting beliefs and beliefs that hold us back.
Yes.
Sometimes those beliefs are in ourselves, in our own minds,
Oh,
or
absolutely.
sometimes they're in the community, or sometimes they're in our culture. And one of the things that I learned about was that one of the biggest fears people have is the fear of freedom.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a paradox, right?
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely.
it's easier
Yeah.
to believe this person or that belief system and
Sure.
like, hook myself onto someone else's view
Yeah.
rather than having to figure it out myself,
So what do
even
you
though
think
I
is
can.
so what do you think is at the heart of the fear of freedom?
Oh, what's at the heart of fear of freedom?
Yeah, what does it come with?
It comes with uncertainty,
Well,
and it comes
yeah.
with
Yeah.
embracing the power of not knowing.
Yeah.
And that is what is a big block. Because
Yeah.
when I talk to people about unlocking political imagination,
Yes.
and I share my ideas for,
Yeah.
constitutional renewal and
Yeah.
a new Emancipation Proclamation 2.0 to
Yes.
decarcerate the 2 million people that are wrongfully incarcerated, like really changing things. They
Mhm.
say, I'm wrong. It's impossible. Why are you talking like that?
Mhm.
So I've learned sometimes that, I can get laughed at and then win. So that's why I proceed forward.
Yeah, I think that the fear of freedom is very real in many ways. And we could go back, if we wanted to, even biblically, to look at the Israelites being released, and what that freedom can bring. We can look at people that come out of things, and the change process being so hard. It's almost like the devil, you're familiar with, and you gravitate towards. It's a repetition compulsion. We're compelled to repeat those patterns of behavior hoping to put a different ending on rather than trying something new because the fear of the unknown is profound. You're exactly right. Also, the fear of freedom is embedded too, and I've got to be responsible and grow in new ways that I've never done before. And what if I have to take on responsibility and I'm not successful in it? I'm afraid of failure through being free now. And so I'd almost be more comfortable back in my that old identity you're describing. It's very real. Yeah. So it's almost a it's almost a paradox. Fear of freedom. Are you kidding me? But it's
Yeah.
very real. And so we stay with what we know. We do what we know.
Mm.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
know you're the initiator also. We're talking about this idea of change. You're the initiator of unifying or unify movements, including the peaceful revolutionary political movement, Unify USA. And it was launched in 2023. And you're trying and looking to create a United States 2.0 through constitutional renewal. Share with us some examples of how you've witnessed folks practicing this love-centered activism such that has led to meaningful, impact and transformation in people's lives.
Yeah, thank you for raising all that. And I do think we're at a moment in our history of our country and of our world where
Yeah.
we have a choice to make. We have a choice to choose the path of repair, healing, and transformation, or we're just going to be managing increasing suffering, despair, and destruction.
Yes.
And it's like we're at that point now where we have to choose. So,
Well,
uh,
curiously enough, we're at the intersection that you were at where you saw coffins being sold in that white van.
mm,
That's where we are right now. Because if we don't do something, those coffins are the only thing we're going to be having to be able to look at because we're going to destruct. I think it's almost the same kind of point in some
mm,
ways.
yeah, that was a good point. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm excited because I'm at the front line of peaceful revolutionary
Yeah.
activism and movement building.
Yeah.
And for example, I think most people recognize that the climate is spinning out of control. It's heating up. It was 126 degrees in New Delhi today. I mean, the highest ever. I mean, we're seeing a massive melting of the Arctic and the Antarctic. We're seeing major effects in every part of the United States, and people are rattled by it, even though and then people try to do whatever they do, or people try not to do what they don't do. So, but I've been excited because I've been working with groups called Climate Defiance and the Sunrise Movement and all these next generation young people who are really building a movement that is speaking truth to power and really challenging the status quo and saying we're not going to tolerate this anymore. I believe that intellectually we have the solutions. What we're missing is the political will because our politicians get stuck in that old pattern that you described.
Mhm.
So I'm excited about that. I've been working on racial equity and racial justice. And so building on the legacy of the civil rights movement and the peaceful resistance and the mobilization of all the people from the communities that were affected by racism, but they were supported by a vast network of white people, Black people from the whole region, and also nationally and even
Yeah.
internationally. So
Yes.
these transformations that we've seen happen aren't in isolation. It's like a collective
Mhm.
confluence of transformative love energy kind of brings forward that healing that we saw in the civil rights movement. So those are some good examples.
Those are great examples. We're kind of rounding the corner here in our time together. I wonder if you could leave us with maybe it's a practical way that our listeners today could, even in their going home to their families or at their work or maybe in a community meeting that they might be in later this week, how could they incorporate a love-centered kind of stance in their own lives and communities, just even this week? Give us something that's kind of practical, pithy.
Well, I think we talked about love speech. So I think that's a great place to start. Have like a little version of yourself looking at yourself and watch what words are coming out of your mouth
Very
when
good.
you're talking to your loved ones, when you're talking to your coworkers, when you're talking to the TV, when you're driving, and just become aware of, what is love speech and what isn't. And,
Yeah.
just start practicing that exploration of love speech. And then with like, okay, I just was about to say something that wasn't loving. How can I redirect that? And, start playing it as a game and have fun with it. And, none of us are perfect at this. So it's like an ongoing game to play.
That's really good. I like the application of that being something we can easily do. Just again, and I love this part of your message, that curiosity about ourselves first. It's not like I need you to change. If I change, maybe there's going to be something different in this dance between us, in this interaction, that I actually set it up for success by being aware and responsible for my love-based quotient here that I bring, and maybe something in that can start the difference and that change to take place. Paul, man, I've loved being with you today. I would love our listeners to be able to follow up with you after the show to learn more about you, your book, Revolutionary Optimism, your memoir as well, also your work with Unify. How can they do so?
Great. I would love folks to go to www.revolutionaryoptimism.com. And that's a place where you can learn about the book, you can buy the book, and then you can sign up and get our Changemakers companion kit, which will help you on your journey of revolutionary optimism. And then if you want to know more about me, you can go to drpaulzeitz.org. And then through that, you can connect to unifiedmovements.org as well if you want to explore the cutting edge movements that are really bringing forward transformation in our country and around the world. I have 25 movements that I'm connecting with and supporting as part of my journey.
Fantastic. Well, Paul, you're a good man. Congratulations on all the things you're impacting and influencing in this imprint that you're leaving in a very, very driven way. What a wonderful message, and what a wonderful life's purpose to bring these things. I want to emphasize again, my view is that you're trying to maybe help us appreciate being at our own crossroads as a nation. I think the world too, but let's start here. And we can take a look at that van that we've passed every day, and we can see it as a van that's there every day, and we can just notice it, or we can really notice it, and we can make a decision that was or is much like the decision you made, that I'm going to do something, that I'm going to pull over the side of the road, and I'm going to really take this in. And what might I do with it? And if we can do that ourselves with your encouragement and maybe with the steps that you're laying out here for us, there's some real opportunity for some pretty profound change. So I've been so enjoying our time today. It's been great to be with you. I'd love to have you back and talk more about kind of what's happening and unfolding for you. But for today, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Peace.
Really nice being here with you today. Well, I also want to thank you, our listeners, for dropping by and joining Paul and me today. It's always great to have you with us as well. Regarding our episode today, I want to remind you that it and its resources and all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. Thanks again for being with us on the show. And we'll look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.